Purpose of this video is to show you guys why giving at least a little bit of a shit when it comes to exercise selection can drastically improve your performance and the results you're seeing from the work you're doing in the gym. When it comes to optimizing your training, there are two things I'd say you should consider, and that's one, challenging a muscle throughout its entire range of motion, and then two, performing like all lines of pull a muscle is capable of doing. So when it comes to challenging a muscle through its entire range of motion, when I'm saying entire range of motion, I'm referring to reaching a lengthened and shortened muscle length when training a muscle. So for example, like if you're going to do a biceps curl, the lengthened position of a biceps is somewhere where your elbow is extended and then your arm is somewhat behind you. And then a shortened position is more out in front and flexed like this. And then you're also going to spend time, like you want to get to those 2 points, but you also want to spend time in the space in between, which we'll refer to as like the mid-range. And you don't have to do this whole movement in one exercise, but as you pick exercises, you want them to range from positions where you are getting challenged in this position and then challenged in that position in the lengthen range. So taking this a step further, I'm specifically using the word challenged when saying challenging a muscle in its entire range of motion, because even if you're spending time in a shortened position, that doesn't necessarily mean that a muscle is being challenged in that position. So the example I'm going to give for this is if you're trying to train the glutes and we want to set up an exercise where we can get to the shortened position and just like squeeze the shit out of your glutes, because that is something, it doesn't feel good. It's definitely intense. Some people fucking like it. But if you are looking into wanting to get an exercise where squeezing your glutes makes sense, you don't want to do it in an RDL compared to like a calf bridge or like a hip thrust. That's where you want to be squeezing your glutes the hardest. And this is when we're looking at like resistance profiles of an exercise. When we're performing the calf bridge or like holding that thrust at the top, the resistance of that exercise is greatest when we're in that squeeze position. So it would make sense for you to spend time in that top position, in that shortened position, because that's where the resistance is greatest and we're challenging the glutes in that shortened position. Compare that to if we want to do an exercise that is challenging the glutes in their lengthened position. You could sit there in a hip thrust and just kind of like relax, and at the bottom of that rep is not going to be nearly as stressful to your glutes compared to at that top. But if we look at like an RDL, in the lengthened position of an RDL, when you're at that bottom, your glutes that is where they have to work super hard compared to when you bring the weight up to the top. There is no resistance for the glutes to work upon. So if you're sitting there just like squeezing the shit out of your glutes, you're just wasting your time and energy where you could be spending time in that lengthened position where that muscle is actually being challenged. And then when you're picking exercises, like I said before, most exercises aren't able to make the entire range of motion from the shortened to lengthened positions. The resistance isn't going to be like hard throughout that entire range. So that's why you want to pick exercises where they have bias towards, like say, the calf bridge does the glutes in the shortened position, and then the RDL does your glutes in the lengthened position. And then the other point of performing all lines of pull that a muscle is capable of doing. This is specific to individual muscles, as some muscles have a much wider range of possible lines of pull. So when we're looking at, let's say, your quads, for example, the quads are responsible for flexing and extending your knee, and it only moves them in one plane, so we really only have to move your leg in one direction when we're trying to train the quads. But if we're going to look at the pecs, we can see how wide of range that we have for possible lines of pull when it comes to this muscle. When a muscle has a wide range of lines of pull, the path that the limb that this muscle is moving, so in the case of our pecs, that it's moving our upper arm, the path that the limb is moving will dictate which portion of that muscle is being biased the most. So if we're trying to train the upper division of the pecs, that upper arm needs to be coming up towards our clavicle. If we're trying to train the middle division of the pecs, the upper arm needs to come towards the sternum. And then if we're trying to target that lower division of the pecs, the arm needs to come down towards the ribs. And then a last thing that I'll mention when it comes to selecting exercises is, as I said before, it's good to know where an exercise is easiest and where it is the hardest. So one, you can train both the shortened and challenge the shortened and lengthened positions, but also it's so you don't repeat the same stimulus even if you are doing like different exercises. So let's look at training your pecs, for example. If you are going to come into the gym and you have time to do like 3 exercises, if you do a flat barbell bench press, if you do a flat dumbbell bench press, and then a flat bench Smith machine press. If you are doing all three of these, they are different exercises, but the stimulus on your pecs is relatively the same. The resistance profile for these, it's heavy at the bottom, and then it's not super easy, but it's relatively easy at the top. So if we're looking to have better exercise selection for this situation specifically, we could switch one of those presses out for using a pec fly machine so you can challenge that shortened position. And if we wanted to make this exercise selection even better, we could put one press at more of an incline and then the other press at more of a decline. I have my own playlist on my YouTube channel of programs that I have made where I specifically go through this thought process, and we're trying to train a muscle as optimally as possible. If you want to follow programs where this thought process has already been laid out and the exercises selected fall within this, you can go to my playlist I have on here called Progression Programming, and I make these programs and then I'll do a corresponding YouTube video where it's just a video breakdown of me telling you the goals of the program and then how to follow the program to get the most bang for your buck and the most results when doing it. If this is something that interests you, you can also subscribe for my weekly newsletter that gives important updates for those programs, as well as I'll go through a specific exercise of the week and then any other topics you guys request. You can head to my website at evolutionaryaesthetics.com and download my Potent Priorities ebook. Within that ebook, it lays down 4 foundational things where you can start at the super basic level when it comes to your training, your nutrition, your sleep, as well as moving outside of the gym. It gives you foundational things to work on first, but then as you nail the basics, you can get more specific towards whatever your goals are. Also within the book, I've got a bunch of other resources, such as like calculating how many calories you might need in a day depending on what your weight goals are, things to improve your digestion, how to make the bulking or cutting experience easier, ways to improve your sleep. It's pretty much your overall encompassing guide to maximizing your gains in the gym, as well as improving your quality of life outside of the gym. Like, share, or subscribe if you found any of it useful to you, and we'll see each other in the next video.